The tempest's gift. The rain slashed across the windshield of Olivia Bennett's sleek Audi as she navigated the winding coastal road. The vintage painting she'd acquired for her gallery was carefully wrapped in the trunk, a rare Francois Boucher that would be the centerpiece of her upcoming exhibition. As the curator of the prestigious Bennett Gallery, Olivia had built a reputation for discovering overlooked masterpieces, though most assumed her success came from her family name rather than her genuine talent for art authentication. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the churning ocean below the cliffside road. Her GPS had guided her onto this scenic route, promising a shortcut back to San Francisco. But the storm had other plans. The car lurched suddenly, pulling sharply to the right before stopping completely. "Not now," Olivia muttered, pressing the ignition button repeatedly. Nothing. She checked her phone. No service. Perfect. Rain hammered the roof as she weighed her options, which seemed to be precisely none. The nearest town was miles away, and the storm showed no signs of relenting. As the car windows began to fog with her frustrated breaths, headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. Olivia hesitated. Her mother's warnings about strangers echoed in her mind, but staying alone in a dead car during a coastal storm seemed equally unwise. When the vehicle, an old blue pickup truck, stopped behind her, she made a decision. Grabbing her purse and wrapping her cashmere coat tightly around her shoulders, she dashed through the rain to the passenger window. The man inside rolled it down, revealing a face with kind eyes and rain-dampened brown hair. "Car trouble?" he asked, his voice warm against the storm's rage. "It just died," Olivia explained, rainwater dripping from her auburn hair onto her designer clothes. "And I don't have cell service," he nodded. "Not surprising, this stretch is notorious for that. Hop in, there's a cafe about 2 miles ahead where you can call for help." Against her better judgment, or perhaps because of the genuine concern in his eyes, Olivia climbed into the passenger seat. "Jackson Reed," he said, offering a calloused hand. "Olivia," she replied, deliberately omitting her last name. The Bennett name often changed how people treated her, and right now she needed genuine help, not opportunistic fawning. The truck's heater blew warm air as they drove, the radio softly playing jazz. Jackson didn't pry with questions, but instead offered simple conversation about the storm and the treacherous beauty of the coastline. "That's my place," he said eventually, pointing to a small building nestled against the cliffside, warm light glowing from its windows. A wooden sign reading Tideline Cafe swung violently in the wind. The cafe was empty of customers when they entered, the storm having driven everyone away. It was a charming space, shelves of books lining one wall, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together, and large windows that would normally showcase the ocean view. "Let me make you something warm," Jackson offered, moving behind the counter. "I should really call a tow truck," Olivia said, though the cozy atmosphere was already working its magic on her frayed nerves. "Phone's on the wall," he nodded. "But, fair warning, in this storm no one's coming tonight. Roads further up are probably flooded already." As if confirming his prediction, Olivia's call to roadside assistance ended with the news that they couldn't reach her until morning. She sank into a comfortable armchair, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. "Chai latte," Jackson said, placing a steaming mug before her. "My own blend." The first sip spread warmth through her chest. "This is incredible." Jackson smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Secret recipe." As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did around strangers. Jackson was refreshingly straightforward, speaking passionately about books, coastal conservation, and his small business. He didn't seem impressed by her designer watch or the subtle markers of wealth she carried. Instead, he listened intently when she spoke about art, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a surprising knowledge of Renaissance painters. "There's an apartment upstairs," Jackson eventually offered as the storm continued to howl. "You can stay there tonight. I'll take the couch down here." Normally, Olivia would never accept such an offer from a stranger. But something about Jackson, his respectful distance, his intelligence without pretension, made her trust him. That night, wrapped in borrowed blankets that smelled of sea salt and coffee, Olivia stared at the ceiling. The tempest outside mirrored the strange stirring in her heart. For the first time in years, she had been seen as just Olivia, not the Bennett heiress, not the gallery curator with connections, just a woman stranded in a storm. And somehow, that felt like the most precious gift the tempest could have given her. Canvas of deception. 3 weeks after the storm, Olivia found herself back in the polished environment of the Bennett Gallery, surrounded by the familiar sounds of champagne flutes clinking and carefully modulated laughter. The François Boucher exhibition had opened to critical acclaim, cementing her reputation further in San Francisco's competitive art world. "Darling, the Prescotts are simply desperate to speak with you about commissioning a collection," her mother, Victoria Bennett, whispered as she glided past in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Do be charming." Olivia nodded, the practiced smile never leaving her face. Yet as she navigated through the crowd of wealthy patrons and critics, her mind kept drifting back to the small cafe on the coast, to steaming chai lattes and conversations that had nothing to do with status or connections. "Ms. Bennett, phenomenal exhibition," said Richard Prescott, a technology magnate whose art collection was more about investment than appreciation. "I particularly admire how you've highlighted the pastoral romanticism without compromising the underlying social commentary." "Thank you," Olivia replied, though she suspected Prescott couldn't distinguish Boucher from Fragonard if his portfolio depended on it. Art speaks most truthfully when we allow it to exist in its contradictions. As she moved through her perfectly curated life in the days that followed, Olivia found herself increasingly distracted. She'd driven past the Tideline Cafe twice, but hadn't mustered the courage to stop. What would she even say? "Thank you for the rescue, and by the way, I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation." Meanwhile, 30 miles away in his quiet cafe, Jackson Reed wiped down tables as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows. The post-lunch rush had subsided, leaving him alone with his thoughts, which lately had been occupied by a certain auburn-haired woman with intelligent eyes and a smile that seemed to hide something. "Package for you, Jack," called Denise, the mail carrier, as she entered with a small box. "Looks important." Jackson thanked her, recognizing the return address immediately. Setting aside his cleaning cloth, he opened the package to reveal a small device, a prototype sensor for monitoring coastal erosion patterns. His design, his patent. What Olivia Bennett didn't know, what most people didn't know, was that Jackson Reed wasn't just a cafe owner. 5 years ago, he had been known as J.T. Reed, founder of Ocean Tech Solutions, a company specializing in environmental monitoring technology. After selling the company for millions, he had retreated from the tech world, exhausted by the constant pressure and superficiality. The cafe had been his sanctuary, a place where he could live simply and authentically. His wealth remained managed by a discreet team, but he had chosen a life defined by genuine connections rather than acquisitions and status. His phone buzzed with a text from his former business partner, Thomas. "The Prescott deal is moving forward. They want to meet the mysterious consultant. You can't hide forever, Jack." Jackson sighed. The technology he'd developed was being incorporated into a major environmental initiative. Good for the planet, complicated for his private life. As he closed the cafe that evening, Jackson found himself thinking about Olivia. There had been something refreshing about her, a depth beneath the polished exterior. He'd Googled her after. She left, of course. The Bennett name was plastered across art magazines and society pages. He understood immediately why she had omitted her surname when they met. "We're not so different," he murmured to himself, locking the cafe door. The following Saturday, a charity auction for ocean conservation brought San Francisco's elite to the Grand Horizon Hotel. Olivia attended dutifully, representing the Bennett family interests while her father networked with potential gallery investors. "There's the tech piece everyone's buzzing about," her friend Penelope whispered, pointing to a display featuring a sleek environmental monitoring system. "Apparently it's revolutionary. The designer is some reclusive genius who refused to sell to military applications. Very mysterious." Olivia examined the device with genuine interest. Her family's foundation had been investing in environmental causes, partly due to her influence. "The bidding on this will be fierce," said a familiar voice behind her. Olivia turned, her heart skipping as she found herself face to face with Jackson. Gone was the casual cafe owner. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, though his eyes held the same warmth she remembered. "Jackson?" she managed, confusion evident in her voice. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, somewhat ruefully. "I could ask you the same, though I already know the answer, Miss Bennett." Heat rushed to her cheeks. "You know who I am." "I looked you up after you left," he admitted. "Famous art curator stranded at my cafe." It was quite the plot twist. Before she could respond, the auction announcer called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to have with us tonight the creator of our featured technology lot. After years of private development, J.T. Reed has graciously agreed to install his coastal monitoring system for the winning bidder." Olivia's eyes widened as Jackson, apparently J.T. Reed, gave a modest wave to the applauding crowd. The mysterious tech genius Penelope had mentioned was the same man who had made her chai lattes and spoken passionately about used bookstores. "You're not just a cafe owner," she said when he returned to her side, the pieces falling into place. "And you're not just a woman with car trouble," he countered gently. "We all have our covers, don't we?" The revelation created a strange tension between them. Olivia felt oddly betrayed, though she had no right to be. She had withheld her identity first, after all. "Why the deception?" she asked as they moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "You're clearly successful. Why hide behind a cafe?" Jackson's expression turned thoughtful. "Because success became a prison. Everyone wanted something from J.T. Reed, the tech entrepreneur. Nobody cared about Jackson, who loves jazz and makes a decent chai latte." He studied her face. "I suspect you understand that better than most." Olivia did understand, perhaps too well. Her life was a carefully constructed gallery where people admired the frame, rarely seeing the actual picture within. "Would you have treated me differently if you'd known who I was that night?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Would you have been yourself if I had?" he replied. The question hung between them, a canvas stretched with truth neither had been ready to paint. As the auction continued around them, Olivia realized she stood at a crossroads. The man before her was not the simple cafe owner who had rescued her, but neither was he the status-seeking socialite she was accustomed to. He was something far more complicated, a mirror reflecting her own carefully maintained facade. And for the first time in years, Olivia Bennett wondered what might happen if she allowed that facade to crack. Brushstrokes of truth. The revelation at the auction had left Olivia with a storm of conflicting emotions. For days afterward, she found herself distracted during gallery meetings, her thoughts drifting to Jackson, or J.T. Reed, as the world knew him. The duplicity between them had created a strange intimacy. They had both hidden behind carefully constructed personas, and both had been seen through. "You've been staring at that same inventory list for 20 minutes, remarked Dominic, her assistant curator, breaking her reverie. "Is everything all right?" "Just tired," Olivia replied, though fatigue had nothing to do with her distraction. Later that afternoon, she found herself driving along the coastal road again, this time deliberately. The Tideline Cafe came into view, its weathered sign moving gently in the breeze. Through the windows, she could see customers scattered at various tables, but no sign of Jackson. She parked but remained in her car, questioning her impulse to come here. What exactly was she seeking? An explanation? An apology? Or something else entirely? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The view from the cliff path is better today. No storms in sight." Olivia looked up, startled, and spotted Jackson standing on a trail that wound up from behind the cafe. He gestured toward the path before turning and walking ahead. The trail was well maintained, winding through coastal cypress trees before opening to a breathtaking overlook. Jackson waited on a simple wooden bench, dressed in the casual clothes she remembered from their first meeting. "How did you get my number?" she asked, approaching. "Thomas knows everyone in tech. Your family foundation uses software we developed. He shrugged. I saw your car. Olivia sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. I'm not sure why I came. Probably the same reason I texted when I saw you sitting there, he said. Unfinished conversation. The ocean stretched before them, vast and changeless despite the constant motion of its waves. Olivia found it easier to look at the water than at Jackson. I've been thinking about authenticity, she said finally. We both concealed our identities, but were we actually being more authentic than usual? Jackson considered this. Maybe. I didn't mention ocean tech, but everything else I shared was real. My love for this coastline, the books I read, why I make chai lattes, that's all genuinely me. The Olivia you met was real too, she admitted. Without the Bennett name hanging over the conversation, I could just be. No expectations, no family legacy to uphold. That's why I left tech, Jackson said. The bigger ocean tech grew, the less I recognized myself. Every decision became about stakeholders and market perception, rather than innovation and purpose. Olivia nodded, understanding completely. The Bennett Gallery was my great-grandfather's vision. Every generation has expanded it, and the weight of that legacy feels crushing sometimes. I love art, truly love it, but I'm never sure if people respect my expertise or just my family connections. As they talked, the careful distance between them on the bench gradually diminished. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had at the auction, stripped of pretense now that their secrets were exposed. I bought your monitoring system, Olivia revealed. At the auction, through a proxy bidder. Jackson looked surprised. Why? The Bennett Foundation has been funding coastal preservation. Your technology was exactly what we've been looking for. She smiled slightly. Also, I was curious about what you'd created. And what did you think? As a connoisseur of fine things? That it's brilliant, she said honestly. Like you. The compliment hung between them, neither fully professional nor entirely personal. Jackson stood, offering his hand. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. He led her back down the path, past the cafe, to a small door at the building's side that opened to a staircase. At the top was a studio apartment, the same one she'd stayed in during the storm, but beyond it was another room that spanned the building's length. Windows faced the ocean, filling the space with golden afternoon light. It was an artist's studio. Canvases lined the walls, seascapes, abstracts, studies of light and water. In the center stood an easel with a half-finished painting capturing the coast during a storm, remarkably similar to the night they'd met. You're an artist, Olivia breathed, moving instinctively toward the paintings with a curator's eye. A hobby, Jackson said, started as stress relief during the ocean tech days, became something more. Olivia examined each canvas carefully, her professional assessment unmistakable. These aren't hobbyist works, the technique, the emotional resonance. She turned to face him. You have genuine talent. Coming from Olivia Bennett, that's quite the compliment. She continued moving through the studio, noting his progression as an artist. The influence is evident in different pieces. Why hide this too? These should be seen. Jackson leaned against the doorframe. They're personal. Not everything needs to be shared with the world or monetized. The statement struck Olivia deeply. In her world, art existed to be exhibited, critiqued, bought, and sold. The concept of creating purely for oneself without concern for audience or market was almost revolutionary. You're a dichotomy, Jackson Reed, she said finally. A tech genius who makes chai lattes and paints like he's conversing with the ocean. And you're an art expert with the soul of an artist who's never picked up a brush, he countered, moving closer. I see how you look at these paintings, not just assessing technique, but feeling them. I've never created art, she admitted, only curated it, studied it, authenticated it. Why not? The question was simple but profound. Olivia had never seriously considered creating art herself, as if appreciation and creation were separate domains and she belonged firmly in the former. I suppose I never felt I had anything original to express, she said, realizing the limitation she'd unconsciously placed on herself. Jackson moved to a small table, opening a drawer to retrieve a charcoal pencil and sketchbook. He held them out to her. Everyone has something original to express. Most just don't give themselves permission. Olivia hesitated before taking them. I wouldn't know where to begin. Begin with truth, he said. That's all art really is. Truth, as you see it. As the afternoon light softened into evening, they remained in the studio. Jackson set up a small canvas for Olivia, guiding her through basic techniques without judgment or expectation. For the first time in years, she created something without concern for how it would be received. A simple, imperfect rendering of the coastline that nevertheless captured something genuine. When darkness fell, they moved to the cafe kitchen, where Jackson prepared a simple meal. They ate at a corner table, the cafe closed to other customers, sharing stories that gradually filled in the outlines of their lives. My parents expect me to marry someone suitable, Olivia confessed over wine, preferably from a family with connections beneficial to the gallery. And what do you expect? Jackson asked. Olivia considered the question seriously. I used to think I wanted someone who understood my world. Now I'm not so sure. Because your world isn't entirely yours, he suggested. Exactly. She looked at him curiously. What about you? The mysterious J.T. Reed must have people lining up. Jackson laughed. Not since I vanished from the tech scene. The cafe owner doesn't attract the same attention. Their loss, Olivia said, surprising herself with her candor. As she prepared to leave, standing beside her car in the moonlight, the air between them changed. The initial deception that had brought them together had transformed into something more honest than either had experienced in years. I'd like to see you again, Jackson said simply. The real you, not the Bennett heiress or the art curator. I'm not sure I know how to separate those things anymore, Olivia admitted. Maybe you don't have to separate them, he suggested. Just stop letting them define your boundaries. Olivia considered this, then made a decision. There's a private viewing at the gallery next Friday. Not the usual social crowd, just artists and a few serious collectors. Would you come? Bring some of your work? The invitation represented a merging of their worlds, her taking a risk, opening a door between her carefully managed public life and this unexpected connection. Jackson studied her face for a moment before nodding. One condition. I'm coming, as Jackson Reed, cafe owner and painter, not as J.T. Reed. And I'll be there as just Olivia, she promised, who happens to know something about art. As she drove away, Olivia felt both lighter and more grounded than she had in years. The carefully maintained canvas of her life had been altered with new brushstrokes of truth, and for once, she was eager to see how the composition might evolve. Shadows and light. The week leading up to the private viewing felt unusually long to Olivia. She found herself checking her phone more often, smiling at Jackson's occasional texts, simple messages about a book he was reading or a new painting, technique he was attempting. Each exchange felt like a small rebellion against the structured communication that dominated her professional life. Friday evening arrived with a flurry of last-minute preparations at the Bennett Gallery. Dominic directed the catering staff while Olivia made final adjustments to the lighting, ensuring each artwork received optimal illumination. Your mother called, Dominic mentioned casually. She wanted to confirm that the Winstons will be attending. Olivia suppressed a sigh. They're not on the list. This is a curator's event, not a fundraiser. I told her as much, he replied with a knowing look. Victoria Bennett's attempts to infiltrate even Olivia's professional events with social networking opportunities were legendary. At 7 o'clock, the gallery began filling with artists and collectors who genuinely appreciated art beyond its investment potential. Olivia greeted each guest personally, her anxiety growing as the minutes passed with no sign of Jackson. Who are you watching for? Asked Amelia Ramirez, a sculptor whose work Olivia had championed the previous year. You keep glancing at the door. A new artist? Olivia answered truthfully. I'm hoping he'll bring some of his work. By 8:30, Olivia had resigned herself to disappointment. Perhaps Jackson had thought better of stepping into her world. She couldn't blame him. The gallery, despite this being a smaller event, still reeked of privilege and exclusivity. Then the door opened, and Jackson entered. He carried a leather portfolio case and wore a simple but well-tailored blazer over a dark shirt. Their eyes met across the room, and the noise of the gathering seemed to fade momentarily. As she approached him, Olivia noticed a woman entering. Behind him, tall, elegantly dressed, with striking silver-streaked black hair. "You came," Olivia said, unable to hide her relief. "I said I would." Jackson smiled, then gestured to his companion. "This is Professor Eleanor Choi. She was my art mentor at Stanford before I detoured into technology. Eleanor, this is Olivia Bennett, the woman who finally convinced Jackson to share his work," Eleanor said, her handshake warm and firm. "I've been trying for years." Eleanor's presence made sense of Jackson's delay and eased the introductions. As an established academic artist, she provided context for Jackson's presence that wouldn't raise eyebrows among the gallery regulars. Olivia led them through the exhibition, introducing Jackson to selected artists and collectors. He engaged thoughtfully with each person, discussing techniques and influences without reverence or intimidation. Watching him, Olivia realized how rarely she encountered someone who moved through the art world with genuine appreciation, uncomplicated by status concerns. Later, in her private office, Jackson opened his portfolio. He had brought 3 smaller paintings, coastal studies that captured the interplay of light and water with remarkable sensitivity. "These are exquisite," Olivia said honestly, examining each one. "You have a gift for translating emotional states into atmospheric conditions." Eleanor nodded in agreement. "I've always told him so. His technology may save coastlines, but his art captures why they're worth saving." When they returned to the main gallery, Olivia was startled to see her mother speaking with a small group near the entrance. Victoria Bennett was not supposed to be at this event, a fact she well knew. "Darling, there you are," Victoria called, approaching with a perfectly calibrated social smile. "The Winstons stopped by after all. Their son Nicholas is particularly interested in contemporary maritime art." Beside her stood Nicholas Winston, heir to Winston Shipping and a fixture on the charity circuit. Olivia had met him at numerous society functions, handsome, well-educated, and exactly the type of suitable match her parents favored. "Mother, this is a professional event," Olivia said quietly, her tone carrying a warning Victoria chose to ignore. "Art is meant to be shared," Victoria replied smoothly, turning her attention to Jackson and Eleanor. "I don't believe we've met." Olivia made the introductions, watching her mother's expression shift minutely as she processed Jackson's name without recognition, then catalogued him as unimportant to her social machinations. "Professor Choi's work has been featured at the Modern Art Museum," Olivia added, deliberately emphasizing Eleanor's credentials to deflect attention from Jackson. The strategy worked. Victoria engaged Eleanor in conversation while Nicholas attempted to draw Olivia away. "I've been hoping to speak with you about the Foundation's Arts Education Initiative," Nicholas said, his interest seemingly genuine. "My family's educational trust has similar goals." As Olivia discussed the program with Nicholas, she remained acutely aware of Jackson across the room. He had moved to examine a painting, standing alone in contemplation. The contrast between his solitary, authentic engagement with the art and the networking happening around him struck her forcefully. When she finally extricated herself from Nicholas and her mother, Olivia found Jackson outside on the gallery's small balcony looking at the city lights. "I'm sorry about that," she said, joining him. "My mother wasn't supposed to be here." "Don't apologize," he replied. "It's part of your world. I knew that coming in. Nicholas Winston is the son of one of my father's business associates," she felt compelled to explain. "My mother has been trying to orchestrate a match for years." Jackson nodded, his expression unreadable. "He seems appropriate. Harvard. Education, family money, charitable interests. On paper, we're perfect," Olivia admitted. "In reality, every conversation feels like a negotiation where neither party actually states what they want." They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the gallery muted behind them. "Your world and mine aren't as different as I once thought," Jackson said finally. "Different costumes, Same masquerade. Everyone performing roles they think they're supposed to play. Is that what we're doing? Olivia asked. Performing? No, he said, turning to face her. That's what makes this complicated. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken recognition. Then Eleanor joined them, breaking the tension. Jackson, several people inside are asking about your work, she said, including a collector who specializes in coastal art. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Jackson's paintings, which Olivia had discreetly displayed in her office, garnered significant interest from serious collectors. By the night's end, he had received offers for all 3 pieces and commissions for 2 more. You could have a genuine career as an artist, Olivia told him as they helped Eleanor into a taxi around midnight. Is that what you want for me? He asked after the taxi pulled away. To join your world officially? The question carried weight beyond its surface meaning. Olivia considered it carefully as they walked toward the parking garage where both had left their cars. I want you to share your gift, she said, but I understand if that's not what you want. What I want, Jackson said slowly, is to remain. True to myself, the cafe, the painting, the technology work, they're all parts of who I am. I'm not interested in becoming a commodity in the art market, even a successful one. Olivia felt a flicker of hurt at what seemed like rejection of her world, of the possibility of them finding common ground. I understand, she said, her professional mask sliding back into place. Tonight was just an experiment. Jackson stopped walking, frustration evident in his expression. That's not... He sighed. I'm not explaining this well. I'm not rejecting the possibility of my art being shown or even sold. I'm rejecting the expectation that I need to become someone else to do it. Someone like me, you mean? Olivia said, quietly. No. Someone who isn't themselves. He ran a hand through his hair. Look at tonight. Your mother showed up unannounced with a pre-approved suitor. You maintained perfect composure while being manipulated. That's the world I walked away from in tech, where authentic connections are secondary to strategic ones. His words struck a nerve. You think I'm inauthentic? I think you've adapted to survive in a world that demands performance, Jackson clarified. And you've done it so well that sometimes the line between the performance and the person blurs. The truth in his assessment stung more than anger would have. Olivia felt exposed, as if Jackson had seen through not just her social facade but her internal justifications for maintaining it. And you think you're immune to that? She challenged. The reclusive cafe owner with a secret identity as a tech millionaire? That's not a performance? It's a simplification, not a performance, he countered. I chose a quieter life because it allows me to be more consistently myself. They had reached her car, the garage mostly empty at this late hour. The conversation had shifted into dangerous territory, too honest, too revealing of the obstacles between them. Maybe we're too different after all, Olivia said softly, a defensive retreat from vulnerability. Jackson looked at her for a long moment. Maybe we're too similar in the ways that make this difficult. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished. Instead, Olivia closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a surprising intensity that left them both breathless when they finally separated. That felt real, Jackson whispered. It was, Olivia confirmed, her heart racing. But as she drove home that night, doubt crept in. The evening had exposed fundamental tensions between them, between his need for authenticity and her entanglement, in family expectations and social obligations. The kiss had been real, but was a relationship possible when their lives were structured so differently? The following week brought a series of events that tested this question. Jackson's artwork sold quickly, creating interest in the mysterious new painter. Meanwhile, Victoria Bennett increased her efforts to throw Olivia and Nicholas together, scheduling accidental meetings and family dinners. Olivia and Jackson continued to see each other, quiet dinners at the cafe after hours, walks along the coastal trails, evenings in his studio where he taught her to paint while she shared her knowledge of art history. Each encounter deepened their connection, yet the underlying tension remained unresolved. Then came the Bennett Foundation's annual gala, the social event of the season, and one Olivia couldn't avoid. When she called Jackson to invite him, the conversation quickly became strained. "I'd rather not spend an evening being assessed by your parents and their social circle," he said. "It's important to me," Olivia insisted. "I'm trying to bridge our worlds. By having me perform the role of acceptable date, put on a tuxedo and make small talk about stock portfolios? You're being unfair," she said, hurt by his characterization. "I'm not asking you to be someone you're not." "Aren't you?" he challenged. "Would you be comfortable if I showed up as the cafe owner rather than the tech entrepreneur? If I talked about painting rather than my patents?" The question hung between them, exposing the painful truth. Part of her did want him to fit neatly into her world, to be impressive enough that her parents would accept him despite his unconventional choices. "I thought so," Jackson said into her silence. "We're trying to force a connection between worlds that may be fundamentally incompatible." That night, alone in her apartment overlooking the city, Olivia faced the shadows she'd been avoiding. She had fallen in love with Jackson. His integrity, his talent, his quiet confidence in his choices. Yet she couldn't reconcile that love with the life she had built, the expectations she had internalized, the performance she had perfected. Across the city, Jackson stood at his easel, working on a new painting, a figure caught between light and shadow, reaching toward something just beyond the canvas. Every brushstroke was an attempt to capture the complexity of his feelings for Olivia, the impossible space between their worlds, and the painful recognition that sometimes love isn't enough to bridge fundamental differences in how people choose to live. The painting, like their relationship, remained unfinished, a testament to possibility suspended in the moment before resolution, caught between shadow and light. Masterpiece of love. The Bennett Foundation Gala arrived on a perfect spring evening, the city glittering below the hilltop venue. Olivia moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting compliments on her emerald gown and the exhibition's success, while deflecting questions about her personal life. Each interaction felt hollow, a performance she could execute flawlessly, but that left her feeling increasingly empty. "You've outdone yourself this year," her father, Edward Bennett, commented as they greeted major donors together. "The Boucher exhibition has brought unprecedented attention to the gallery." "Thank you," Olivia replied automatically, though the praise barely registered. Across the room, Nicholas Winston approached, handsome in his tuxedo and bearing 2 champagne flutes. Her mother's orchestration was so transparent it would have been comical if it weren't so suffocating. "You look stunning tonight," Nicholas said, offering her a glass. Though somewhat distant, "Is everything all right?" The genuine concern in his voice surprised her. In their numerous socially engineered encounters, Nicholas had always been polite, intelligent, and appropriate. Everything her parents wanted for her. What he had never been was perceptive about her emotional state. "Just tired," she offered, the standard deflection. Nicholas studied her face. "May I be honest, Olivia? Without the usual social filters?" Intrigued, she nodded. "I think we both know what's happening here," he said quietly. "Our parents have been playing matchmaker for years, and while I find you fascinating and beautiful, I also recognize the look of someone whose heart is elsewhere." His directness was refreshing after weeks of carefully measured conversations. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who understands the feeling." Nicholas smiled ruefully. "I've been seeing someone my parents wouldn't approve of, a marine biologist who works for an environmental nonprofit. She's brilliant, passionate, and utterly unimpressed by the Winston name." The revelation shifted something in Olivia's perception. "Why haven't you told your parents?" "The same reason you're standing here with me instead of whoever has captured your attention," he replied. "It's easier to perform the expected role than to disappoint people you love." His words struck her with unexpected force. Was that truly her reason? Fear of disappointment rather than courage of conviction? What if the performance becomes so convincing that you lose track of what's real? She asked, voicing the fear that had haunted her since her argument with Jackson. Then you've lost something more valuable than social approval, Nicholas said simply. You've lost yourself. Their conversation was interrupted by Victoria Bennett, who appeared with a prominent museum director in tow. Olivia excused herself. Shortly after the introductions, Nicholas's words echoing in her mind as she sought refuge on the venue's terrace. The night air was cool against her skin as she leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out at the bay. Lights from boats and buildings reflected on the dark water, creating an impressionistic tableau that reminded her of Jackson's paintings, reality transformed by perception and emotion. In that moment of quiet contemplation, Olivia confronted the truth she had been avoiding. She had spent years curating her life as carefully as she curated exhibitions, selecting which parts of herself to display and which to keep hidden, always with an eye toward how the composition would be received. The result was aesthetically pleasing but increasingly hollow, a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt incomplete within. Jackson had seen through the curation to the artist beneath, the woman who could lose herself in the emotional truth of a painting, who laughed without restraint at his terrible jokes, who had discovered joy in creating imperfect art of her own. He had offered her not just love but the freedom to be fully herself, and she had hesitated, caught between worlds. With sudden clarity, Olivia knew what she needed to do. She returned to the gala only long enough to make her apologies to her father, claiming a migraine that wasn't entirely fictitious. The weight of inauthenticity had indeed become physically painful. The drive to the coast took nearly an hour, giving Olivia time to consider her words carefully. When she arrived at the Tideline Cafe, the lights were off, the building dark against the night sky. Undeterred, she followed the path they had walked together, up to the cliff overlook where they had first begun to share their truths. Jackson sat on the bench, a sketchbook open on his lap, though it was too dark to draw. He looked up at the sound of her approach, surprise evident even in the moonlight. "You're supposed to be at the gala," he said as she sat beside him, the emerald silk of her gown incongruous against the weathered wood. "I was," Olivia acknowledged. "But I realized I was in the wrong place." Jackson closed his sketchbook. "What happened?" "I had a conversation with Nicholas Winston," she began, then gave a short laugh at Jackson's expression. "Not what you think. He helped me see something I've been avoiding. All these years I thought I was protecting my family's legacy, living up to expectations. But really, I was hiding." "From what?" "From the possibility of failure," she admitted. "If I followed the script perfectly, successful curator, appropriate social connections, suitable marriage, then I would never have to risk discovering who I might be outside that narrative." Jackson remained silent, allowing her to continue. "The night we met when my car broke down and you thought I was just a stranded traveler, that was the first time in years I felt fully seen for who I am, not what my name represents." Olivia turned to face him fully. "You showed me a different way to live, to create, to connect. And when it came time to choose, I hesitated because the script felt safer than the blank canvas." "And now?" Jackson asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Now, I understand that authenticity isn't something you achieve once and maintain forever," she said. "It's a daily practice of choosing truth over convenience, vulnerability over performance. I want that practice with you, even if it means redrawing the boundaries of my life." Jackson reached for her hand, his fingers warm against her skin. "What about your family? The gallery?" "I'm not abandoning my work or my family," Olivia clarified. "I'm just refusing to let them define the entirety of who I am. I can be Olivia Bennett, curator and art expert, and also be a woman who paints badly, but with genuine passion, who loves coastal cafes and complicated men who make excellent chai lattes." A smile tugged at Jackson's lips. "Complicated, huh?" "Brilliantly so," she confirmed, returning the smile. "I don't want perfect alignment between our worlds, Jackson. I want the creative tension of difference, the growth that comes from seeing life through each other's perspectives." Jackson was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "I've been working on something," he said finally. "Come see." He led her to the studio above the cafe, turning on a single lamp that cast warm light across the space. On the main easel stood a large canvas, unlike any of his previous work. It portrayed two distinct worlds, one of polished galleries and formal gardens, the other of rugged coastlines and simple cafes. At the center, where the worlds merged, two figures stood in a pool of light that seemed to radiate from their connection rather than from an external source. "It's us," Olivia breathed, moving closer to absorb the details. The technique was masterful, but it was the emotional truth of the piece that captivated her. The tension and harmony, the contrast and complementarity. "I started it after our argument," Jackson explained. "I couldn't resolve the composition, at first. The worlds seemed too distinct, the division too absolute." "What changed?" she asked, noting how the boundaries between the worlds blurred and intertwined at the edges. "I stopped trying to resolve the contradiction," he said simply. "I realized that the beauty was in the juxtaposition itself, not in forcing one world to conform to the other." Olivia turned to him, understanding the metaphor completely. "That's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to erase our differences, or pretend they don't exist. I want to create something new from them, a third space that belongs to us alone." Jackson cupped her face gently, his expression solemn. "It won't be easy. Your mother already dislikes me, and that's without knowing I rejected a showing at her friend's gallery last week." "You did what?" Olivia laughed despite herself. "Countess, Penelope's gallery of contemporary excellence," he confirmed with a grimace. "She wanted to market me as the tech genius who captures the soul of the sea, or some equally pretentious tagline." "Oh, she'll be furious," Olivia said, still laughing. "Mother's been trying to get an invitation to her summer gala for years." "See? I'm already disrupting your social ecosystem." "Good," she said firmly. "It needed disruption." Their kiss this time felt different. A sealing of promises, a commitment to the complex, beautiful mess of combining their worlds. When they separated, Olivia gestured to the painting. "Will you finish it?" Jackson shook his head. "It's already complete. The story continues beyond the canvas. That's the point." 6 months later, the Tideline Gallery opened in the space adjacent to Jackson's cafe. The small, carefully curated exhibition space featured works from emerging artists alongside selections from established masters borrowed from the Bennett Gallery's collection. The unique combination drew attention from the art world while maintaining an accessibility that welcomed locals and tourists alike. Olivia divided her time between the Bennett Gallery in the city and the coastal exhibition space, finding unexpected freedom in the dual role. Her parents had adjusted to the arrangement with varying degrees of acceptance. Edward Bennett appreciating the business acumen of expanding the family's influence, Victoria maintaining a polite distance that was gradually warming as she witnessed her daughter's evident happiness. Jackson continued his environmental technology work, establishing a small research lab that employed local science graduates. His paintings now appeared in select exhibitions, though he maintained his right to refuse shows that didn't align with his values. The cafe remained open, a gathering place for artists, environmentalists, and community members, with Olivia occasionally taking a shift behind the counter when the mood struck. On the 1-year anniversary of the night, Olivia's car broke down. On the coastal road, they stood together on the cliff overlook, watching the sunset transform the ocean into molten gold. "I have something for you," Jackson said, presenting her with a small wrapped package. Inside was a miniature painting, a perfect rendering of the stormy night they had met, the lighthouse beam cutting through darkness, creating a path of light across troubled waters. "Our beginning," Olivia said softly, tracing the brushstrokes with her fingertip. "One version of it," Jackson amended. "There are many ways to tell a story, depending on which elements you emphasize." Olivia thought about the multiple narratives that had shaped their journey: the stranded traveler and the cafe owner, the heiress and the reclusive genius, the curator and the artist. Each version contained truth, yet none encompassed the whole. "Which version do you prefer?" she asked, leaning into him as the last light faded from the sky. "The one we're still creating," Jackson replied, his arms secure around her waist. "The masterpiece that can't be hung on a wall or contained in a frame. The one that continues to evolve with every choice we make." As stars appeared above them and lights twinkled on boats crossing the bay, Olivia considered how far they had come from that stormy night. They had navigated the complexities of merging different worlds, learning when to compromise and when to stand firm, when to accommodate each other's differences, and when to celebrate them. The result wasn't perfect harmony, it was something more valuable. A relationship built on authentic connection, mutual growth, and the courage to continually redraw the boundaries of possibility. Like all true masterpieces, their love story wouldn't be static or preserved behind glass, but alive and evolving, each day adding new brushstrokes to the canvas of their shared life. In the distance, the lighthouse beam swept across the water, illuminating a path forward. Not a straight line, but a journey of discovery with shadow and light, challenge and beauty, all essential elements of the masterpiece they were creating together.